Imagine you're an older Spartan in 480 BC, standing on the rocky slopes of Mount Tagitas. The cool morning air smells of pine, and you hear the distant cry of eagles flying above. In your hands, you hold a newborn baby, its tiny fingers gripping your crimson cloak. The baby's cries echo off the cliffs as you look down at the dark abyss below. You've done this walk many times, but today feels different. This baby belongs to one of Sparta's most respected families, a line known for kings and heroes. But when you unwrap the swaddling cloth and see the baby's twisted foot, your heart sinks. The foot is deformed, marking this child as unfit in the eyes of Spartan law. Looking down at the apathy, the place of rejection, you know what must happen. Far below, the bones of countless other children who failed Sparta's ruthless test of strength lie scattered. Despite the noble blood, wealth, and status, this baby will join them. In Sparta, weakness is no place. Imperfection is unacceptable, and those who cannot contribute to the state's war machine are discarded. What you're about to witness isn't just infanticide. It's a brutal system where children deemed unworthy are eliminated. The Spartans didn't view this as murder. They saw it as necessary, part of their duty to create the world's fiercest warriors. But the reality was far darker than what most people realize. To understand the horror, you must know that Sparta wasn't just a military power. It was society built to create perfect soldiers, where every part of life served that goal. This didn't happen overnight, but was a result of centuries of choices that turned human compassion into cold efficiency. It all started during the 8th and 7th centuries BC, during the Mycenaean Wars, when Sparta conquered its neighbors and enslaved entire populations. These enslaved people, known as helots, outnumbered the Spartans 10-1. Surrounded by enemies who wanted them dead, the Spartans developed a siege mentality, believing their survival depended on military strength and sacrifice. Spartans came to see themselves as cogs in a machine, existing solely to serve the state. Children were evaluated not for their potential as people, but for their usefulness as soldiers. Every law, custom, and ritual reinforced this focus on military perfection. The legal system that allowed for the killing of children was founded by a semi-mythical figure, Lycurgus. While historians believe the system evolved over generations, it doesn't matter who started it. It was fully entrenched in Spartan life. The killing of imperfect children wasn't done secretly. It was a public ceremony, carried out by respected elders and witnessed by the whole community. It was seen as vital for Sparta's survival. Children weren't just killed for obvious physical flaws. A birthmark in the wrong place could doom a child. Even slight developmental delays could be fatal. Some healthy children were eliminated simply because they cried too much during inspection, suggesting they lacked emotional control expected of warriors. What's most disturbing is that the system had broad public support. Spartan mothers were expected to proudly hand over their children for inspection, understanding that rejection was possible. Fathers showed no emotion when their children were condemned, demonstrating their loyalty to the state. The community even celebrated these deaths, seeing them as necessary sacrifices for the greater good. By 480 BC, this practice had been in place for generations, with thousands of children already lost to the cliffs. But the real horror wasn't just the individual deaths. It was how society justified these actions, convincing itself that killing children was not only acceptable but noble. The selection process for Spartan children began before birth. Expecting mothers were constantly monitored. What they ate, what they did, even their bloodlines were scrutinized. The Spartan state was deeply invested in breeding the perfect warriors, so they took no chances with the birth of children. Expecting mothers were given specific foods meant to enhance strength and courage in their babies. They were required to stay active and avoid anything that might harm the child. When labor began, it wasn't a private family matter. State officials were informed, and preparations were made for the mandatory inspection that would determine if the baby would live or die. The birth itself was meant to test the baby's strength. Spartan women were expected to give birth with minimal help, believing that tougher births led to stronger children. After birth, the real test began. Within days, every Spartan baby was presented before the Gerousia, a council of the oldest, most respected men. These weren't doctors or child experts. They were warriors who had survived years of battle, and believed only the strongest deserved to live. The council's examination was harsh. They checked every part of the baby's body for weaknesses, tested reflexes, watched breathing, and examined the baby's response to different stimuli. A weak cry could seal the baby's fate. If the child seemed overly fussy, it was seen as a sign of poor emotional control. They even scrutinized the shape of the baby's head, as certain physical traits were thought to indicate intelligence and courage. What made this process even more chilling was its randomness. There were no scientific or medical standards. The decision could be based on an elder's personal bias, such as a belief that the child's eyes were weak or that they showed signs of foreign ancestry. Some babies were rejected just because the council didn't feel right about them that day. Children who passed initial inspection still faced further testing in their early years. They were regularly evaluated to ensure they met Spartan standards. If a boy was slow to develop, showed fear during training, or formed too strong a bond with his mother, he could be considered unfit and eliminated. The threat of death hung over every child, creating a constant sense of fear that shaped their entire upbringing. For those children who didn't meet the standards, the outcome was always tragic. While many babies were thrown into the chasm of Mount Tajitas, called the apathy, evidence suggests other methods of elimination were used as well. Some were abandoned in the wilderness to die, while others were drowned in sacred pools. A few were given to helot families, forced into lives of slavery among the very people the Spartans oppressed. The emotional toll on the families was devastating, and it was intentionally so. Parents were forbidden from grieving. Showing sadness for a lost child was seen as weak and uncommitted to Spartan values. Mothers who cried could face punishment or social rejection. Fathers were expected to praise the decision of the elders, no matter how painful it was. The system of cruelty created a cycle of trauma that affected generations. Parents who had lost children were more likely to support the system, as confronting its brutality would mean acknowledging their own involvement in it. Children who survived lived with the constant knowledge that their lives were at the mercy of the state. Their existence depended on maintaining the approval of the very men who had shown they were willing to kill. This created a class of elite men within Sparta, who took pride in their role in eliminating those who didn't meet the standards. The elders who sat on the Gerousia treated child rejection like a sacred duty, competing with each other to show how hard-hearted they were, even when faced with borderline cases. This system also destroyed the natural bond between parents and children. Spartan parents were trained to see their children not as their own, but as temporary assets of state, subject to being taken away at any moment. This detachment was seen as a virtue, a preparation for the sacrifices needed for military life. The child elimination system in Sparta wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was a logical result of society that had made military efficiency the highest priority, sacrificing every other human value in the process. To understand how society could come to view child murder as acceptable, we need to look at the larger cultural and institutional factors that made it seem not just permissible, but necessary. At the core of this system was a belief in genetic determinism, the idea that physical and moral traits could be passed down predictably. The Spartans thought that by eliminating children with undesirable traits, they could improve the entire population over time. This wasn't ignorance. It was an intentional eugenics program, long before the term eugenics was even coined. There were also economic reasons for this brutal system. Sparta relied heavily on slave labor, with the helots doing all the agricultural and craft work. This freed up Spartan citizens to focus entirely on military training, ensuring that Sparta remained a powerful military force. The Spartan system, built on the need for military strength, created a constant sense of fear. The helots, who vastly outnumbered the Spartans, regularly rebelled, forcing the Spartans to use brutal violence to maintain control. Every Spartan citizen was essentially a soldier in a never-ending battle for survival. The state couldn't afford to support anyone who couldn't contribute to this military effort. Children who weren't expected to become effective warriors were seen as a drain on resources better spent training those with greater potential. Religion played a key role in justifying the killing of children. The Spartans worshipped gods of war and strength, believing that only the finest offerings would please them. Killing weak children was seen as a sacrifice, a way to show the gods that Sparta was serious about its military excellence. The reaction of the broader Greek world shows how successful Sparta was in normalizing this cruelty. While some philosophers criticized the practice, many others saw it as proof of Sparta's discipline and commitment to the greater good. They believed the system showed that Sparta's military success came from their willingness to make hard choices other societies wouldn't dare to make. This approval from other city-states only reinforced Spartan beliefs about their own superiority. When other Greek states faced internal struggles or military defeats, Spartans would point to their eugenics practices as the reason for their success. The system was self-perpetuating. By eliminating children who might question Spartan values, the system ensured that each generation was more loyal to the ideals of war than the last. By removing those who were emotionally sensitive or intellectually curious, Sparta created a population better suited to their harsh way of life. What made this even more insidious was how the child elimination system was presented as a mercy. Spartan propaganda claimed that killing weak children spared them from lives of suffering and failure. It argued that allowing imperfect children to survive was cruel, because it condemned them to a life of persecution in a society that valued only strength and military prowess. This idea became so ingrained in Spartan culture that parents truly believed they were doing what was best for their children by supporting their elimination. Now, let me share the stories of 3 children whose fates highlight the full horror of this system. While their names are not recorded, since Sparta didn't document the lives of those deemed unworthy, their stories, pieced together from archaeological evidence and fragmentary accounts, reveal the human toll of a society obsessed with perfection. The first child was born around 485 BC to one of Sparta's royal families. His father was a direct descendant of the famous King Leonidas, and his mother came from a prestigious family as well. Under normal circumstances, this child would have been destined for greatness, perhaps even a throne. But when the council of elders examined him, they found a cleft palate, which made nursing difficult and would likely affect his speech development. The elders debated for 3 days. This was royal blood, genes that had produced some of Sparta's greatest warriors, but the deformity was obvious. It would mark the child as imperfect for life, and more troubling, it suggested even the noblest bloodlines could produce flawed children. This posed a threat to Sparta's entire eugenic system. When the decision was made, it was final. The child's elimination was turned into a public ceremony, attended by hundreds of Spartans who came to witness the state's commitment to its principles. The child's parents were required to watch as their son was taken to Mount Titus. They were praised for accepting the elders' wisdom without protest. The mother later gave birth to 3 more children, all of whom passed the inspection and grew up to become distinguished warriors. But palace servants noted that she was never the same. She would often sit for hours, staring at the mountain where her firstborn had died. The second child was a girl, born to a middle-class Spartan family in 479 BC. Her father was a professional soldier, and her mother came from a line of strong women who had produced many successful sons. The baby appeared healthy at birth and passed the initial inspection without issue. But as she grew, it became clear that she was developing more slowly than other children. By 6 months, she still couldn't hold her head up steadily. By 1 year, she was far behind her peers in reaching basic milestones. The family did everything they could to hide their daughter's condition. They kept her inside and limited contact with neighbors, hoping no one would notice her developmental delays. Her mother worked tirelessly with her every day, trying to help the child catch up to normal developmental milestones. But the quarterly inspections, which all Spartan children had to undergo, made it impossible to keep the truth hidden. When the delay was discovered, the punishment went beyond just the child. The family was condemned for trying to deceive the state, and their older son was removed from the elite training program as a punishment for their disloyalty. The daughter was sentenced to be abandoned in the wilderness, a slow and painful death compared to the quick drop from Mount Titus. But this story has a different outcome. A group of helot slaves working in the fields found the child alive after 2 days of exposure. They secretly took her in and raised her as one of their own. Growing up among the enslaved population, her Spartan heritage was kept hidden, and her developmental delays didn't matter in a community that valued survival over perfection. She lived to adulthood, had children of her own, but could never reveal her true origins without risking death for herself and those who had saved her. The third child was a baby boy, Born in 476 BC, to parents who already had two sons serving in the Spartan military. This child appeared perfect, strong and healthy with no visible defects. However, during his first winter, he developed a persistent cough, suggesting weak lungs. The family's trusted physician warned them that the quarterly inspection would likely result in the child's condemnation. Faced with this terrible reality, the parents made a choice that would have horrified their neighbors if they knew. They killed their own son, suffocating him gently in his sleep, rather than letting him face the brutal elimination methods used by the state. They reported his death as a sudden illness and gave him a proper funeral, providing him the dignity that Spartan law would have denied him. When Sparta fell to Theban forces in 371 BC, one of the first things the victors discovered was the extent of the child elimination system. The Theban soldiers who explored Mount Titus found the apathy chasm, filled with centuries of accumulated bones, the remains of thousands of children who had been deemed unworthy of life. The sight was so disturbing that even battle-hardened warriors, men who had seen countless deaths on the battlefield, were moved to tears. After Sparta's collapse, the true cause of the eugenic obsession became clear. Generations of child elimination had severely reduced the population. There were simply not enough Spartans left to maintain their society. The gene pool had become so narrow that birth defects started to become more common, not less due to increased inbreeding. Those Spartans who survived struggled to adjust to a world where the rules were different. While they were physically strong and militarily capable, they had no economic skills, no artistic traditions, and no intellectual pursuits outside of warfare. The very system that had made them strong had also made them unable to function in peaceful society. Almost immediately, a historical cover-up began. Later Greek historians, embarrassed by this dark chapter of their civilization, romanticized Spartan practices while downplaying their most disturbing aspects. The child elimination system was recast as a rational response to resource scarcity or as a necessary step to maintain military effectiveness. The horror of it all was sanitized into admiration for Spartan discipline and commitment. Roman historians, centuries later, further whitewashed the story. They transformed the tale of child murder into one of noble sacrifice for the greater good. The Romans, who themselves had issues with infanticide, found it convenient to present the Spartan system as an example of wise governance, rather than acknowledging it as a form of systematic genocide against children. This historical revisionism continues today. Popular culture still presents Spartans as noble warriors, fighting for freedom and honor, while conveniently ignoring the foundation of child murder that their society was built upon. Movies like Star 300 star depict them as heroes defending civilization, when in reality, they had eliminated the very humanity that civilization is supposed to protect. Archaeological evidence tells a different story. Excavations at ancient Spartan sites have uncovered clear signs of the systematic disposal of infant remains, confirming the account of ancient historians who describe the child elimination practices. Modern forensic analysis of these remains shows evidence of violent deaths and deliberate disposal, supporting the historical reports of children being thrown off cliffs or left to die in the wilderness. Even more tragically, we continue to uncover the full extent of these practices. Recent excavations have found that child elimination wasn't limited to Mount Titus. It occurred at multiple sites throughout Spartan territory, indicating that the practice was even more widespread than we had previously believed. The Spartan system of child elimination is not just a thing of the past. It's a chilling example of systematic dehumanization, a pattern that has appeared throughout human history and continues to manifest in various forms today. To understand how an entire society convinced itself that killing children was not only acceptable but necessary, we must look at how they redefined the worth of human life. In Spartan society, a person's value was determined not by their intrinsic worth, but by their perceived usefulness to the state. Once the idea took hold that some lives were more valuable than others, and that external authorities had the right to decide, eliminating those deemed unworthy became not just possible but inevitable. This same dangerous logic has appeared throughout human history in genocidal movements. Today, advances in genetic testing have opened the door for similar kinds of selective elimination, though our methods are more sophisticated and our justifications more medical. The fundamental question remains: who decides which lives are worth living? Prenatal genetic screening has led to a reduction in the birth rates of children with certain conditions, sparking what some disability rights advocates refer to as a modern form of eugenics. The Spartan obsession with military utility can be seen in modern societies that often define human worth through economic productivity. When healthcare systems make treatment decisions based on quality-adjusted life years, or when social services prioritize those most likely to become productive citizens, we see the same utilitarian logic that fueled Spartan child elimination. Educational resources are often allocated based on perceived potential for success, mirroring the Spartan approach of choosing those who fit their ideal vision of usefulness. Perhaps most disturbing is how quickly societies can normalize practices that once would have seemed unthinkable. The gradual expansion of acceptable reasons for eliminating children, the bureaucratization of the process, and the rise of professional classes whose livelihoods depend on continuation of these systems are all warnings for modern institutions. The praise that Sparta received for its eugenic practices reminds us that evil systems often present themselves as rational, scientific, and progressive. The admiration other Greek city-states had for Sparta's child elimination shows how easily cruelty can be mistaken for enlightened governance. Now, let's return to the windswept cliff where our story began. The Spartan elder stands at the edge of Mount Titus, holding a baby whose only crime is being born with a twisted foot. In that moment, he represents more than just one man making a difficult decision. He symbolizes an entire civilization that had convinced itself some children deserved to die. The child in his arms could have grown up to be anything: a poet, a philosopher, a loving parent, or simply a human being deserving of life. We'll never know, because Sparta had decided that perfection mattered more than humanity, that military efficiency outweighed compassion, and that the ideal Spartan citizen was worth any sacrifice. When the elder finally lets go and the child falls into the darkness, something dies with that baby that goes beyond just one life. It's the death of the idea that every human has inherent worth, regardless of their physical abilities or usefulness to society. The bones scattered in the chasm represent thousands of similar moments, thousands of children whose potential was never realized because they failed to meet arbitrary standards of perfection. Those deaths didn't make Sparta stronger. They made it weaker, more fragile, and less adaptable to change. Today, as we face our own questions about genetic testing, healthcare decisions, and the value of different lives, the ghosts of those Spartan children remind us of a simple but vital truth. The price of perfection is often humanity itself. The silent voices from the depths of Mount Titus whisper that every life has value. Any society that forgets this lesson risks losing its very soul. If this exploration of history's hidden darkness has left you wanting more, I prepared another deep dive into the forgotten stories of the past. Click on the video now to uncover another shocking chapter history tried to erase. And if you found this journey as compelling as I did, hit subscribe so we can continue uncovering these layers of history together. These lost voices deserve to be heard, and there are so many more stories waiting to be told.